My guest today is someone I fondly call the Amitabh Bachchan of the tech industry in India. I've known him for over 2 decades, and over that period, he has been a friend, philosopher, and guide, not just to me, but numerous others who have known him. Even now, post retirement, as some would call it, but not him, he remains far more active than people half his age, proving that the Energizer Bunny has absolutely nothing on him. He graduated from the famous IIT Kharagpur as a chemical engineer at a time when a good education was a privilege and landing a good job thereafter was nirvana. But he had a knack for seeing what was coming around the corner, whether it was choosing a tech career over big offers from global chemical giants when he graduated, or leaving a plush job at one of India's leading tech services firm to join a little-known networking company as its country head for India. He always seemed to take the path less taken. Passionate and relentless are two words that sum him up in my mind, for he always believes in making a difference wherever he goes and in whatever he does. Please welcome the master of impact, Mr. Manoj Chugh. Mr. Manoj Chugh, thank you very much for making time to come on to my podcast, Why, Who, and Where. I've always had you in mind from the beginning. There are few people who are as busy as you are, and for good reason. I've personally always considered you to be the Amitabh Bachchan of the Indian tech industry. I mean, you're evergreen. I was looking at your profile. The journey started in 1982 at HCL, and boy, oh boy, the energy is the same. Sir, thank you very much for coming on to this show.
Rubin, thank you very much for the opportunity, and I must say that I am greatly honored, and particularly so because you and I have shared some part of my journey, for which I'll always be very grateful. I don't know whether you know this or not, but you've played a very, very important role uh, in my life as well. So again, thank you for the opportunity, and I do hope that we will be able to make this podcast valuable for everyone who cares to tune in and listen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, I have to admit, at least it was, I think, 2003, the EMC journey started for you. And I still remember welcoming you into the organization, being part of that leadership team that had brought you on board in India. And it's been a 22-year association now that we've had almost, which is fantastic. So let me start by asking, if somebody goes to your LinkedIn, right, they don't really see too much on early days, college, and there's already so much past that. But walk us through a little bit about, the early years and as a young man going through college, what were you thinking?
Zubin, I think that today nobody is interested in any guy who has a history which dates back to more than 4 decades. So I guess that's why, as you said, there is very little known. But people with whom I've worked in the early years, of course, we've shared very fond memories I would say, those foundation years. I went to college. I started in 1977. I know that sounds like a long, long time ago. At that time, our engineering degree was for 5 years. Right, in India, you don't exactly get to choose 100% what you like. So as long as you broadly land up where you want to be, I think you consider yourself to be blessed and fortunate. And certainly I was when I got the opportunity of studying chemical engineering, something we were talking about just prior to this show. And that was an interesting journey for me. I didn't know anything about chemical engineering when I took the subject, but as I studied it, I liked it more and more and more. But of course, destiny took me to the IT industry, though I studied something very different in the formative years. And I would say IIT played a very important role in terms of shaping my thinking. And a lot of the management lessons that I have implemented, I have imbibed, I have understood, I have shared Actually, the foundation of that is from my days at the institute.
And IIT is, look, getting into the IIT was never easy. It still isn't. I guess those were probably also the times where you were just happy if you graduated and got a job. Youngsters today have many, many choices. I think it goes into the thousands and thousands, the different streams. And you started with, if I remember correctly, it was HCL, and then it was Wipro for a very long time. It's an organization I respect immensely. It's given some of the best leaders in. Walk us through the early years and how tech was, and how did that shape or determine of the path that you took later on in life.
Zubin, it's interesting. When I was graduating out, I had a number of job offers, some of them or largely a number of them in core chemical engineering areas, and I had a couple from the IT industry. And IT was a sunrise industry at that point in time. I had not studied computers. I had not taken even a software course, during my time at college. But yet something in me told me that maybe this is the industry where I will find my mooring. And I was very blessed and fortunate. Some of my seniors had played a very important role in founding HCL. Many of them were in reasonably senior positions in the firm at that point in time. So they came to campus to hire. So I think in a way, I felt comfortable. I felt that I would be going into an environment where we all kind of come in from a common stock, if nothing else. And
Yes.
that gravitated and motivated me to join HCL. So my manager was from my institute, his manager was from my institute, his manager was from my institute. So really you could say that skip levels and beyond, there
It
was a
was the
great
alumni.
comfort in terms of culture, right? So in a way it was like, still being in your old dorm, if you will,
Right.
from a culture perspective. So I think I fitted in very easily. I understood what the organization wanted to do. I was incredibly happy the time I was in HCL. Actually, it's interesting. Zubin, a senior of mine, one day came to me and said, "Look, there is this new firm which is kind of investing in IT. It's early days yet; they are getting in. They are currently in the consumer goods business, but whatever we have heard, they will do well in IT." And they said, maybe, that's the place you should go because they are planning to come out with more advanced systems than what HCL had at that point in time. And I told my senior, look, I'm having great fun. Why would I want to leave all of you and go there? And I remember the senior said, no, Manoj, we know you. We have been working with you. We think that you will really find a mark and make a mark for yourself, in that organization, which is looking at more advanced computing. You'll get the opportunity of working with, larger enterprises, with more respectable organizations. And we believe that it's going to be good for you. I kept resisting this. And then one fine day, a colleague of mine brought a newspaper ad in front of me and said, I'm not moving from here till you fill up the application and we will mail it for you. So literally in office, I sat, in my horrible handwriting, I wrote out the application and then I forgot about it. A few months later, a couple of my other colleagues, they were invited by Wipro, the organization that I had applied to at that point in time. It was 1983, long, long time ago. And got selected and gave good feedback. So a couple of months later, when kind of Wipro invited me to come in and go through the interview process, I had some idea about the organization, at least some positive feedback from a prior colleague. So as luck and destiny would like it, I joined Wipro. It was the end of 1983. I stayed with the organization for almost 14 years. Long journey, very successful journey. And again, this was not a firm which I was looking forward to leave, frankly. But as you know, right, destiny has things already ordained at times. And at times, of course, you shape it the way you want to. So that's really the early years. Fantastic journey at IIT, learned a lot, got into HCL, almost felt like I was in my dorm, same fraternity, got pushed by a senior colleague to
To go to
throw my
Wipro.
hat in the ring,
And yeah,
joined Wipro, and then I loved the organization so much, stayed on for 14 years. So those were, I would say, the
wonderful.
first 15, 16 years of my life in engineering.
I usually, and I'm guessing in your career, there've probably been a few and not just one. But if you were to pick a defining moment in your in your career of 4 decades, is there any one that stands out? Like, everything changed after this moment. Was there ever any such moment for you?
I think, Zubin, I have more than one such moment. I think the first is what I've shared with you, that at the point in time when I stood at the crossroads of making a decision whether I should take a role in an engineering firm and take an engineering role versus going to an industry which I knew very little about and which my academic background did not support. I think for me, that was a defining moment. I knew that I would find it incredibly hard to explain to my parents why I took the decision that I took. I don't want to talk about the organization that I had job offers from at that time, because if I name the organization, even you'll turn around and say, Manoj, I would never have made the decision that you made. There are these marquee organizations, marquee brands in India who you will never ever refuse to take a job in, and
Absolutely.
particularly so, in the years that I graduated. So I knew it's going to be a tough call going into an unknown, unheard of organization when you have an offer from India's marquee brand. But I took that tough call at that time. So I think that was one defining moment. The second defining moment for me was when I left Wipro. Very hard decision. I had done well. There was no reason for me to change. The organization had been very fair with me. I had got the roles that anyone and everyone would perhaps dream of getting and may not ever have got in their careers. I got promoted at very regular intervals. I had access to top management. I was like family. There was no reason as to why I would have left Wipro. And frankly, Zubin, and my wife knows this, the night that I was on my last day at Wipro, I couldn't sleep that night because I wasn't sure whether the path ahead I had chosen was the right one. And really, this path was about joining global multinational firms. India had moved on. 1991 had happened. We had got our economic
Yes.
freedom, as we like to call it now. It was 1997. So, global firms that started setting foot in India. And from a technology perspective, while it was early, a few firms had only come in by then. There was an opportunity that came my way, and I took that opportunity, which meant, frankly, that I would have had to reset my entire career and begin right from the beginning as an individual contributor and then grow the business. So very, very tough when you're a general manager heading, a nationwide business, large teams, to kind of throw all of that away and then become an individual contributor. And Zubin, being a HR professional, you know how hard that is.
Absolutely. And I'm the other thing I remember, and I think it was Scientific Atlanta, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's right.
That
That
was
was
the
the one.
organization. And which was, like, and I've done so many senior leadership hires in India, and India being the culture that it is, right? People tend to look at the size of the company, the size of the job, the number of people under someone, the size of the car, the size of the house, and everything, right? I mean, it just becomes, I think India is a lot more entrepreneurial today than it ever was probably 2 or 3 decades ago. But I notice also that you have this tendency to go and undo, or sorry, just go and find that challenge again. Because from Scientific Atlanta, you went to Cisco, and that became a big organization. And then, and then there you were at EMC, which was probably not even a tenth the size of what you were running at Cisco. What's behind that?
Zubin, I've always looked, or I've attempted to look beyond the corners and beyond the curve, as one would say, and look for where is it that I can create impact from a technology perspective. Now, if I take you back to 1997 and we look at India's telecom infrastructure, you would remember that at that time we didn't have mobile phones. Uh, Mobile telephony came in little while later. Landlines were very hard to get. And
Absolutely.
if you had to run a business, you had to rely on very poor telecom infrastructure. The tele density was low. So whether it was a corporate, whether it was government institutions, whether it was us as individuals, telecom infrastructure was pathetic. We had the worst telecom infrastructure in the world. We had the most embarrassing tele density numbers at that point in time. I saw satellite networks as a huge opportunity to connect India. Now, mind you, Subin, when I began my career, our GDP, India as a country, was $200 billion. Today,
Right.
it is more than 18 times that.
Right.
So, we were a country which really badly needed good telecom infrastructure to be able to jumpstart.
Right.
And I saw satellite communications as a very viable, affordable, when I say affordable, relatively, particularly for corporates, governments, and such institutions, to adopt this mechanism, if you will, to be able to drive high quality voice data and video communication. And we all know today that communication plays an incredibly important role in terms of driving up productivity, in terms of democratizing the access to information and improve standards of life. So, from my perspective, I felt that if I threw my hat in the ring and I was able to bring in good, high quality satellite network based communication systems in India, I would be able to move the needle forward by some. And I was incredibly happy and delighted with the progress that we made at that point in time, whether it was for disaster recovery projects, whether it was just to connect the oil firms, whether it was to connect the large FMCG firms. Now they could talk to somebody at their depot. They could talk to somebody in their far-flung factories. They could do video conferencing with, all of their rainmakers, around the
Yep.
country.
Yep.
And when you looked at political leaders, if there was a disaster, they could just speak to the local DM to figure out what was happening and get relief to the right people at the right time. Because guess what? You're now not dependent on landline infrastructure. There
Correct.
is something 36,000 kilometers above the earth that is helping you to connect. I think that
Absolutely.
was a remarkable, I would say, level of self satisfaction from my point of view that I achieved during the years that I was there. So I'm glad I made that decision. It was a tough decision. Everyone felt that I was out of my mind, leaving a good job, leaving an organization that I perhaps, had done my little bit to help build into something which was dramatically new. And I frankly
Right.
didn't know anything about satellite networking at that point in time. I didn't even know what a satellite looks like. Forget trying to design networks that leverage satellite to drive high quality communication.
You picked satellite communication, you picked networking at its onset, as an industry where it was like, and by onset I mean really the onset in the Indian market. You picked data storage at the onset,
Yeah.
so you clearly have this thing for, you talked about looking around the corners. I also think you kind of apply, I get the sense that you applied that to what's the next big thing in um, on the tech side. uh, we talk about all the successes always, every time you meet anyone and you see a career as distinguished as yours. um, were there setbacks? And you know and I'm guessing there have been a few, but are there setbacks, and are there setbacks that stand out in memory?
Zubin, I think it's a very interesting question that you ask about setbacks. We always have our challenges. Right?
Yep.
When you're in the market, you will lose deals. And the good news is 5 years later, you will forget them unless somebody reminds you. So I would say that I've been blessed and fortunate that I don't have very major setbacks that I would say didn't lead to something better for me. So I think every point where I felt that, oh, this is a setback for me, actually, my next journey turned out to be even better and bigger. So I would say that, when you work for global tech firms, there's always the potential possibility that there are going to be disagreements. And particularly with people with a very strong, I would say, set of ways of thinking. And I consider myself to be one of those guys uh, who are not flexible on some specific areas and issues on how businesses should be run. I think each one of us has our own set of values. Then you can say that that would be a setback because the organization now wants to follow a different trajectory versus the one that you believe is right for the organization. So I would say my setbacks have been more around alignment in terms of where I have wanted to take businesses, but where perhaps the leadership of the organizations that I work for didn't want that to happen. But when I look today and I look back, I don't see them as setbacks because the next journey was even more exciting.
Very true.
And you know that after my journey at Cisco Zubin, I had the opportunity of meeting you. So I can hardly say that leaving Cisco was a setback,
We
right?
probably would
Because
not have met. You're right.
I would never,
You're right.
I would never have made, the friendships that I did with your help, as I moved on. So I would say I never looked at setbacks. I mean, at that point, things, of course, look like a setback. But when you reflect a few years later, they turn out to be decisions which all happen to turn out right. And that's what I'll encourage everyone. Don't look at a setback as something which is permanent. 5 years later, you might turn around and say, that's a good thing that happened.
I guess when life closes a door, it opens a window, as the old phrase goes. And is there a certain mantra you follow in all of this? Is there something that you tell yourself? You mentioned that what this setback is leading to something, but and maybe I'll ask this question first. I usually save it for last. What's the one advice you would give to aspiring people who are mid-career or even who are probably at their late 40s or early 50s, thinking about what next? Because there are all these things that go on in the mind. Will I be perceived as going down a step? Will I be perceived as this or that or whatever? How can someone probably make that decision making simpler? And if you might have something to share on that thought process.
Subin, I think that I know in today's generation, it's hard for people to accept what I'm going to say. But it's very important to determine one's core purpose. Like I was very clear that whichever opportunity I took, it was not just for the job or the role or for meeting the quarter numbers or year numbers, but it was about doing something which was larger than life, doing something which was much bigger in terms of impact and cause, and something which history would turn around and perhaps judge me in a positive fashion. So I never looked at these jobs and roles as something, what's in it for me? What is
Right.
my ESOP plan? What is my variable plan? What is my comp? Those are important things. Don't get me wrong. But what I really looked at was, do I truly have the opportunity of creating that impact which will help me achieve my purpose? And I want to go back, Zubin, to the years when I was in college. And what disturbed me a lot was that by the time we all reached our final year, there used to be this mad scramble for everyone to go to the US for either further studies or for looking for their fortune or for their future.
Right.
And that disturbed me a lot because a lot of students never saw India as their home, India as the
Right.
place where they could build their future or their career. And that disturbed me because I felt that why is it that we as a country are not able to provide them the confidence that they will be able to lead a good quality of life for themselves, be professionally fulfilled, and also, create, I would say, the right environment for their children in the future. These are the key anxieties any individual has. There's nothing for me here. Quality of life is not that good. I mean, look at the infrastructure. Again, when you start looking at your manufacturing facilities, they're far from world class. I am a good engineer, did my best, got into a fantastic institute. So why should I waste the rest of my life trying to make stuff happen here when the entire world is beckoning?
Right.
And that was always something that rankled me at the back of my mind. And therefore, whenever I got the opportunity, which I did, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, I wanted to change that. So I think it's about impact. It's about your desire to make a difference. It's about doing something much, much larger than what you've signed up for in terms of your job application form, or in terms of your KRA, or in terms of your OKRs from an appraisal perspective.
I guess that's what people call wanting to build a legacy, no matter how big or small. It's your imprint on whatever transpires from there on in that opportunity or organization or society. You have been a mentor to many people, including myself. Are there any mentors that you think of today, like people who played a very key part in your life? And it could be anyone. It doesn't have to be only the professional world, but family, parents, partner, whatever. I mean, who were your? I'm very curious to know who mentored Manoj Chugh.
Zubin, I will answer that question, and you might be a bit surprised with my response, and I will give that response. I just want to quickly comment on what you said. See, I never did things because I wanted to create or leave a legacy. I never did things because, if I do this, somebody is going to put a garland around my neck. And I think that is a message I want to give everyone, that you can create a positive impact. You need not necessarily get recognized. So
Yes,
never do something
understand.
because you expect something else in return.
Yes.
So whatever I did, whenever I did, I think I've created a good, significant, positive impact. But I never did that with the goal of saying that the world should recognize me. I did it for the sake of myself, because that, I believe, was my core purpose. So we'll come to that in a few minutes. But answering your question on the role model, my role model right from childhood, Zubin, has been Swami Vivekananda.
Okay.
Because he was a pragmatist. He spoke about the need to make sure you're physically comfortable, but yet achieve your goal thereafter. Like Swami Vivekananda, we all know, would say that, you can't pray to God on an empty stomach.
Yes.
So very pragmatic, right? Now, people like me who got into a business, professional environment, that was true for us, right? We need to make sure we make our variable pay happen, but that doesn't mean that we don't pursue our core purpose.
Right.
And therefore help create happiness for everyone else around us. So help open opportunities for everyone else around us. Doesn't mean we don't do that. We can do both. And I think the lessons of Swami Vivekananda really influenced me to the extent, Zubin, I have a baby brother he's 12 years younger than me. When my brother was born, my mother said, "What should we name your brother?" I said, "Oh, that's simple. I always knew what to name him. We will call him Vivek." And
wonderful.
That's what we did.
Wonderful,
so I said
wonderful.
that whoever was my role model, I've now got a kid brother. I'll make sure that whenever I call him by his name, I always remember my role model. So I think, that has greatly influenced me. And the stories of Vivekananda, and there are so many, and we all know those, are absolutely fascinating. And I loved his pragmatism, living in the real world while doing what you are actually supposed to do.
Right. Right. When you look back, is there anything you would have done differently?
Anything that, sorry, Zubin, I missed that.
You would have done differently. Anything that you would have done different, or if you could change something that, happened, or redo something,
Yeah, I
Subin,
mean, I
if I
don't mean to
had
suggest, are there any regrets? No, that's not the
yeah,
question.
I
But,
understand. No,
you know, yeah,
maybe one thing which I could have done and I was not brave enough to do. And therefore, I always encourage everyone who comes to me for advice to try it. And I keep telling everyone, right, that I was a corporate slave for way too long. I
right,
didn't pick up the courage to become an entrepreneur. Now, of course, the enabling environments today are very, very different. But that notwithstanding, though the thought would come to my mind each time that in my journey I had the opportunity to relook, what next. I still chose the path of comfort, I would say, in terms of picking up a role or a job. And of course, when I picked up the role and job, that was something which aligned with my overall thinking. But the path that I did not take was voluntarily choosing to become an entrepreneur. Unlike you, Zubin, right? You've done that a number of times, right? And so I think
in
that
my
same bug,
second inning now,
the
in my
second it is,
second
I
inning
said,
now.
the bug bit you and you did something about it. The bug bit me, but I didn't do anything about it. So to me, that is a regret. I could have failed, that's fine. Then I could have come back in the corporate world, called friends like
Yes,
you and said, here's my CV, help me out. But I just could never pick up the courage, Zubin. And I think it is a lot to do with my own background, my own, I would say, my own fears, and maybe inconsistencies in my mind. Sometimes I would say, did I have enough confidence to make the leap? Maybe lack of confidence to make that bigger leap. That's something which certainly, if I were to live my life one more time, maybe when, uh, you know, after my role at EMC, for example, I was 52, 53, maybe that was the time that I could have said, let me jump in and try something on my own. I did
right,
not.
right, right. But I think, if I can just say on behalf of all the many thousands and thousands that have worked with you, it was all for their good that you came back into corporates every time, and that many more people. And I say this, I have to say this here. You were mentor. I still remember how much you had appreciated me taking that step of entrepreneurship in 2005, and you would come at my request without taking anything from us, just come over on weekends, sit with my little team, mentor us and how we are going to go to market and help us, and your enthusiasm and encouragement till today, it everybody who worked in our little business then still remembers those weekends when you would fly down from Delhi to Bangalore and encourage us, motivate us, give us ideas, because we were just recruiters getting into a business, and then how to go to market and whatnot. Um, and thank you for that. I've never forgotten. Um,
Thank you,
if there
Zubin,
is,
for the opportunity. In a way, you can say I was trying to fulfill my own dream through you, something that I couldn't do.
thank you,
So
thank you,
I would
thank
say
you.
that I want to thank you for giving me that opportunity
I'm
of
I'm so humbled.
experiencing the freedom for the time that I was with your team
Experiencing
whenever
five
we
guys
met.
in a little room brainstorming, and I still
But you know
remember
that,
we were discussing like, how we save money everywhere. Like, we're not going to take the big car, we're going to take the small car and everything, and just, frugality and purpose and all those values that you helped us cultivate. I still remember. Mr. Chugh, I asked this question as a parting question of every guest. And this could be asked of one in two ways. If you were speaking to a younger version of yourself, or if you were speaking to any youngster today or somebody mid-career, probably still going through the turmoil of what next, what is the one advice you would give people as they embark on whatever it is they want to do professionally?
yeah, my one advice, Zubin, to them would be that when you pick up your next role, think deep and hard in terms of what is the impact that you're going to leave behind. I think many professionals today are very caught up in the materialistic ways in which they look at their roles. Oh, I was a general manager there. Now here, I am a senior manager or I am deputy general manager. I'm getting a step down. And then, they kind of get into a negative spiral. And I keep asking people, hey, is this your internal designation or your external designation? And they're all caught up into all this. And
Yes,
many times I tell people, hey, just go print a business card and write whatever you want on that, right?
exactly,
The
exactly.
important thing is that what is the impact that you think you're going to be able to create? Do you think you'll get the freedom to be able to create that impact? And if you are not going to be able to create that impact in that organization, irrespective of how much they pay you, sooner or later you get very, very unhappy. So you have to think beyond yourself. And I want to
Right.
push and encourage everyone to think beyond themselves. And I will tell you, Zubin, when I was at Cisco and we started the Network Academy program, talking to hundreds of institutes, coercing many of them, cajoling some, nudging some, to introduce networking as curriculum in our colleges. A lot of my colleagues came and said, Manoj, but that's not on the KRA. You get paid to damn drive a quarterly number. And my only point to them was, if I go by that logic, then nobody will ever grow a mango tree. And they said, Manoj, one thing we can promise you is that whatever work you're doing, you're not going to see the benefit of it. It is some future generation leader who will take the credit. I said, this is not about credit. If India has to succeed, then we have to network, leverage these technologies, and we can't do that unless we have the manpower. Because the biggest question customers would say was, I love this technology, but who's going to install it? Who is going to deploy it? Who's going to support it? Who's going to maintain it? Who's going to help make sure that all the bits, bytes are moving across the entire organization? So I would say those would be the very, very big questions which would be asked. So I could turn around and give some salesish answer or do something about it. And today,
Right.
India has the largest pool of networking professionals on the planet. And the same
Yes.
thing, Zupin, you and I saw that journey, and we were a part of it together. You remember, right? When
Yes.
in the initial years you got me into EMC, and we had this dream that we need to get American tech firms to come invest in India, create large engineering centers so that we can go and build good quality jobs in India. And you would remember how you partnered with me and how we worked with one of our old friends to really nudge EMC at that time to invest $100 million, which Zubin, from your own experience, was no
Yes.
mean task. And particularly that in a country where the revenue was minuscule, right? Low single
Minuscule.
digit,
Absolutely.
low single
I
digit.
still remember. I still remember we were doing a campus visit, or was it one of the larger tech firms, the Indian tech firms, where somebody once asked, why should we come to India if wages are growing at the rate they're growing? And I think there was a gentleman by the name of Mark Lewis, and then you chimed in later, and both made one point: you don't come to India because you're going to save money. Only you come here because this is where you'll find the next 500,000 engineers. And because it's a way of life, the motivation for people to study science, math, get into computing, it was just culture. It had, and leaders like you played a part in imbibing that culture into more and more youngsters. I still remember your speech at one of the RECs that we had gone to, and one of the regional colleges. And yeah, so I guess it's really it's about the impact. You're absolutely right. I don't think the greatest leaders have probably ever looked at. I know so many who don't even know what their pay slip says, so they're not sure. They know it's a ballpark, but they're so consumed by what they're doing. So you're absolutely right.
And Zubin, the other
Uh,
thing, I think if we go back, and when I talk about core purpose and connecting that to doing something which is much greater, much beyond your remit, if you will, is that, and I'm very glad that that prophecy has turned out to be right 3 decades later. Our message was very simple, that you come to India for cost. but you will stay for quality and you will invest for innovation. Whenever people
Beautiful.
would say that, Indian salaries are rising, the engineers are becoming more expensive, and that was what I would say, that, yeah, I agree you came for cost, but you're not going to stay for cost. And today, if you look at the innovation that is happening, you look at more than 1,600
Absolutely phenomenal.
GCCs in India. At that point in time, Zubin, would you and I ever have dreamt that there'll be 1,600 GCCs, more than that, going to 2,000 in the next few years, lots of them in Bangalore? We could never, ever, ever have dreamt,
Absolutely.
of this.
Absolutely. It's one of the
Creating the
greatest
impact.
stories when you look at it of an industry. It's a phenomenal success story. Indeed. Indeed. At that time, we were just preoccupied with one GCC making it, and that was the one we were trying to make. But it's just 1,600. That's just an amazing number. Amazing number. So I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy day and talking to me and all of us, all the viewers of this channel. It's a viewership that's growing. This is another way that I'm sure you realize you're giving back. If we can, I keep saying this with every episode, even if we inspire one person, I think the episode has been a success. And I think in this case, you're going to inspire many, many more to go and build out their journey. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm greatly honored. And I would like to congratulate you, on starting this initiative. And I'd like to wish the initiative all the very best and every success. And more power to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.